Anxiety is not just a random storm inside you. It is the voice of your unconscious trying to tell you something you've ignored. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Think about that for a moment. What if your unease isn't weakness, but a signal? What if your restless nights and racing thoughts are not proof you're broken, but proof that something inside you wants to be seen? In today's video, we'll explore Jung's wisdom on anxiety, not as an enemy to fight, but as a message to understand. Because when you learn to listen, anxiety transforms from chaos into guidance. And that is where true inner peace begins. Make the unconscious conscious. Carl Jung. Anxiety often feels like an enemy, but Carl Jung saw it differently. He believed that anxiety is what happens when the conscious mind refuses to hear the unconscious. When you bury feelings, ignore conflicts, or live a life that isn't a truth to you, your psyche does not stay quiet. It speaks through unease, tension, and restlessness. Jung wrote, "Neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering." In other words, the pain we run from returns as anxiety. Think about that. The more we avoid the truth about our work, our relationships, our desires, the louder the anxiety becomes. It is not there to destroy you. It is there to call you back to yourself. Carl Jung observed that much of our anxiety comes from what we project onto others. When we deny parts of ourselves, our anger, envy, or desire, we don't make them disappear. We see them in the people around us. We feel unsettled, defensive, even anxious, not because of them, but because of the reflection they hold. Jung explained, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." Anxiety in relationships is often the unconscious saying, "Look closer. What disturbs you out there is a mirror of what you've ignored in here." This doesn't mean you're to blame for everything you feel. It means you are invited to become curious. Instead of fighting the irritation, ask, "What part of me is being revealed right now?" Jung warned that anxiety doesn't only live inside the individual, it also grows inside societies that repress their truth. When fear, anger, or grief are ignored on a collective scale, they don't vanish. They surface as restlessness, division, and widespread unease. Jung wrote, "The greatest danger to humanity is not nature or machines, but the collective unconscious of man." Think about this. The constant background anxiety we feel scrolling news feeds or walking through crowded cities may not all be personal. It's the echo of a collective shadow, the unresolved conflicts of millions. And just like with personal anxiety, the answer is not to escape it, but to face it and begin the work of integration. Carl Jung believed that dreams are not random, they are the language of the unconscious, the same voice that creates our anxiety in waking life. When anxiety builds, the unconscious often speaks in symbols at night, chasing dreams, falling dreams, being trapped or overwhelmed. These images are not punishments, they are signals. Jung explained, "Dreams are the guiding words of the soul." Instead of dismissing anxious dreams, Jung advised us to treat them as maps. Each image, the locked door, the endless stairway, the faceless crowd is your psyche's attempt to show you what you refuse to see by day. When you pay attention, the anxiety that once felt vague and overwhelming begins to take shape, and once it has shape, it can be faced. Many of our deepest anxieties do not begin in adulthood. They are echoes of wounds formed in childhood moments when our true feelings, fears, or needs could not be expressed. Jung observed the greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parents. When a child is forced to hide anger, to swallow sadness, or to perform in order to be loved, those parts do not disappear. They retreat into the unconscious waiting, and in adulthood, they resurface as anxiety. That restless unease before a big decision, that tightening in the chest when you fear rejection, often it is not today's event that stirs it. It is yesterday's silence, yesterday's fear, still unresolved. To face anxiety, Jung reminds us, we must also face the child within us, the one who was not allowed to speak. Carl Jung believed that every human being is called to a process he named individuation, the journey of becoming whole, of uniting the conscious with the unconscious. But here's the paradox. The closer we get to change, the more anxiety we often feel. Jung wrote, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." When your soul pushes you to grow, your ego pushes back. It resists because growth means letting go of old masks, old certainties, old comforts. That inner battle is often what we call anxiety. The racing thoughts before a big decision, the tightening before a leap into the unknown. It isn't proof you're failing. It is proof you are on the edge of transformation. Jung reminds us, anxiety does not mean you are broken. It means you are standing at the threshold of becoming. Jung noticed something most of us overlook. Anxiety is not only destructive, it is also raw energy, and where there is energy, there is potential. Jung wrote, "Anxiety is the greatest creative force, if we learn to harness it." Think of the restlessness you feel before starting something new. That same nervous energy, if redirected, can fuel art, writing, problem solving, or building something meaningful. Many of history's most creative minds struggled with anxiety, but instead of letting it paralyze them, they shaped it into music, books, inventions, or movements. The same force that spins your thoughts in circles can also be the fire that lights your path forward. The difference is not in the energy itself, but in how you choose to meet it. Carl Jung never said we should run from anxiety. He urged us to listen to it carefully, patiently, because anxiety carries the very message we need to grow. But how do we listen? Jung often turned to practices of reflection, journaling to capture the symbols of dreams and restless thoughts, silence and solitude, giving space for the unconscious to speak, creative expression, writing, drawing, or music to let hidden parts of the psyche surface. He explained, "The soul speaks in images, not arguments." Instead of asking anxiety to go away, Jung would tell us to ask, what image is trying to emerge through this discomfort? When you record, reflect, or create, the chaos begins to take shape, and what once felt unbearable becomes understandable. Although Carl Jung lived in the early 20th century, his insights about anxiety may be even more relevant today. He warned that when life becomes dominated by speed and external demands, the inner voice grows restless. And isn't that exactly what we face now? Notifications, deadlines, endless comparisons, all fuel anxiety because they pull us further away from the center of ourselves. Jung observed people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. Our modern distractions, constant busyness, constant scrolling, are often ways of avoiding silence. But silence is where the unconscious speaks. The more we drown in noise, the more anxiety knocks at the door. And yet, this also means the cure is close at hand. A return to stillness, reflection, and presence. Most of us treat anxiety as something to fight, medicate, or escape. But Jung suggested a different approach. He saw anxiety not as a curse, but as a teacher, a voice that demands to be heard. He wrote, "The shoe that fits one person pinches another. There is no recipe for living that suits all cases." Anxiety is your soul, telling you that the life you're wearing does not quite fit. The discomfort is guidance, pushing you to adjust, to change, to grow. When you stop seeing anxiety as proof of weakness and begin seeing it as feedback, something remarkable happens. You no longer waste energy fighting it. Instead, you listen. And in listening, you begin to heal. Carl Jung often reminded us that the psyche is not static. Every symptom, every conflict, carries energy that can either destroy us or transform us. Anxiety is no exception. It may feel like chaos, but beneath the surface, it is raw potential. Jung explained, "There is no energy without opposition. Your unease, your racing thoughts, your tension, all of it is proof that energy is present, and energy can be shaped. When you face what you fear, anxiety becomes momentum. When you acknowledge what you've avoided, anxiety becomes clarity. The very restlessness that keeps you awake at night can also be the spark that moves you toward healing, creativity, and growth. The key is not to suppress anxiety, but to learn to channel it. Jung's most famous warning was this: until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Anxiety is one of the clearest ways the unconscious tries to get your attention. When ignored, it shapes your choices without you realizing it. You may stay in jobs you hate, relationships that drain you, or patterns that feel unbreakable, and call it bad luck or fate. But Jung tells us this is not destiny. It is unconscious life steering the wheel while you sit in the passenger seat. The moment you stop running from anxiety and start listening, you take back the wheel. What once felt like fate becomes choice, and what once felt like punishment becomes freedom. Carl Jung was not only a thinker, he was a guide. He understood that anxiety cannot be dissolved in theory alone. It must be worked with, daily, gently, consistently. So, how do we do that? Jung pointed us towards small but powerful practices. Begin with journaling your anxious thoughts, not to control them, but to see them clearly. Practice silence each day, even if only for a few minutes, to let the unconscious breathe. Pay attention to symbols in your dreams, in your art, even in the coincidences of daily life. And above all, treat anxiety not as an intruder, but as a guest with something to teach. Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Every time you pause, listen, and integrate, anxiety shifts. It loses its sharp edge and becomes a stepping stone toward your authentic self. Carl Jung never promised a life without anxiety. He knew it is woven into the human journey, but he also showed us that anxiety is not the end, it is the beginning. It is the signal that something inside you wants to awaken, the proof that your soul is asking for more. Jung wrote, "Your vision will become clear only when you look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens." Every anxious thought, every restless night is an invitation to look within, not to fight, not to flee, but to listen. And when you do, you discover that anxiety does not make you weak. It makes you human, it makes you alive, and most importantly, it makes you ready. Ready to grow, ready to transform, ready to live, not in fear, but in presence. This is only the beginning of what Jung taught us. If this spoke to you, stay with me. Because the journey inward is the journey home.